Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. We've got everybody here. First of all, I'll call the special closed council meeting to order, and then I'll recess it until after the open and closed GP meeting and the finance committee meeting. So let's go right into the general purposes committee. Councilor McNulty, I understand you want to add number 9, which is to consider a referral on a mask policy for city buildings. It would be a referral motion. Can you unmute yourself and tell us?
Have that added to the agenda, and I'll discuss it when the item's on.
All right. May I have a motion on the agenda as revised then?
So
moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All right. I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to the minutes. May I have a motion on the minutes? Moved and seconded. Any discussions, errors, or omissions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is carried. Now let's see. Everybody's got their videos on. Yeah, so that's good. We'll use our hands to vote today. So the first item is the housing agreement number 136 on Carscallon Road. Cody Spencer, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add to the report, but we're happy to answer questions.
All right.
Recommendation.
So that's moved and seconded. Any questions on that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It's carried. The next item is the application on the ALR subdivision 3031 number 7 road. I'll go to staff. Wayne Craig, Stephen D'Souza. Anything to add to the report?
Through the chair, just a couple highlights on the report. The purpose of the application is to subdivide the home site from the larger agricultural parcel, as per the Agricultural Land Commission's home site severance policy. The proposal includes transferring the remainder parcel to the property owner's child as part of the family farm succession planning and the continuation of the farming operation by the next generation. As per ALC policy, the subdivision and transfer of the parcel must be done concurrently. The proposal was reviewed and endorsed by the Food Security and Agricultural Advisory Committee, and should the application be approved by council, it will be forwarded to the ALC for their review and decision. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, so normally all we do is just, emphasize anything in the report or give anything new. So I'll go to questions on this. Okay, I've got some questions. I've got Councillor McNulty, Day, Steves, Wolf. Bill, Councillor McNulty? Yes. Go ahead. Yeah, you're muted, Bill. You're muted. Go ahead.
Okay, now? Okay.
Yep.
All right. I have a whole slew of concerns about this particular one, Your Worship. And I need staff to even though it's going to the ALC and they make the decision. But I think given our operations in the back with people subdividing, to me, this is like a subdivision. To be quite frank with you, you switch from the front to the back. And I was a bit surprised when I see some of the answers on GP 53. 2 previous subdivisions that have been approved. I don't remember those. I hope members of council approve it. The putting the property to the owner's children. What about future sales down the road, 10 years down the road, et cetera, et cetera? I'm very concerned about to understand this a little better, the implications of the way this is presented. It's not to be sold for 5 years on the death of the owner. Oh, okay, whoopee. People will hang on to it. And then it opens up all kinds of doors for all kind of others. We got 32 other parcels sitting there. We wouldn't let a number of families just subdivide and give a piece of property to the brother and a piece of property to the sister who were legitimate farmers in Richmond. And now this comes along, but we can give it to kids. And so I guess what I'm trying to do is understand it more, Your Worship. Because one of the...
Let's get an answer.
Okay, well, let me just finish first. You know, on page 55, it says where benefits of agriculture can be demonstrated. And then it will create potential for additional development after that. It doesn't say what kind of development. So I think this warrants further study from our point of view, or at least a memo from staff clarifying each of these things. It's not that I'm trying to stop somebody from doing good things for their property, if that's indeed what it is. But we got into this mess once before, and I'm not prepared to go forward until we get those kinds of answers. And I'd like them in writing too, Your Worship.
Well, let's get staff to respond. And also we have a gentleman who wants to speak to us on this, who I take it is one of the consultants.
Well, that's good. I'd like to hear from them.
Involved in the matter. So, staff, please comment.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, in terms of the subdivision, this is a subdivision. It is within the special home site severance policies of the ALC. It is council's discretion as to whether or not the application is forwarded to the ALC for their consideration. Council does not have to automatically forward the application. In terms of assurances on future sales or transactions, the only certainty is with respect to the 3.2 acre home site that would be severed. It must be retained by the current owner for a minimum period of 5 years in accordance with the ALC, and the ALC will be registering agreements to that effect. In terms of the benefit to agriculture, the subdivision is being proposed in order to obtain financing to allow the existing or the remaining agricultural property to be converted into cranberry production.
I guess my question, Your Worship, if I could, and I appreciate that, but is this something that could be abused down the road if one wanted to subdivide their property and just say, well, let's divide it, and I'm going to give my brother half, and he's going to farm his half, and I'm going to farm my half. I mean, I don't see any difference, except this is within family, but my brother is also family.
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, in terms of the ability to pursue similar applications, the primary driver would be the fact that the original property owner has to be the applicant, and that original property owner had to be the owner of the property when the ALC was formed. So it is restricted to who can apply for this type of subdivision.
Okay, I'd like to hear other discussion from other councillors. Thank you.
Well, there's to Wayne, there's also a no build covenant on here, so you can't keep subdividing, can't keep developing the property for the parcel where we have the residence, where they have the residence. That would be the only building that would be allowed on that parcel, right?
Through your worship, you are correct. Yes, the subdivision would create the potential for an additional residential dwelling. To address that concern, we have discussed this with the applicant. They are willing to register a no build covenant on the agricultural property to indicate that no residential dwellings will be permitted.
All right.
My concern there, Your Worship, is on page 55, where we have right in writing, it would create, I quote, it would create the potential for additional residential development. Boom.
Yeah, but just a minute. Read the next sentence. In response, they're putting on a no-build covenant.
I know, but I'm worried about the next one and the next one and the next one. And we don't know what the ALC will do. They do funny things.
Wayne, please comment on this, because as I understand a no-build covenant, it'll be registered on the title, and that will be it.
Through the chair, that is correct. The covenant would be registered on title of the agricultural property. It would run with the land and bind any subsequent owners to that requirement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Bill, you've got your hand up and you're muted. Okay, Councillor Day. You need to unmute yourself, Carol.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same concerns, but it sounds like some of them have been answered. So there's going to be a registered no covenant, and I get that. But this, as I understand, this site already has a house in excess of 6,600 square feet. So it is, from what I understand, non-compliant the way it sits right now with the new rules that are in place. So I guess what I'm worried about is that if we go forward, what kind of precedents are we setting? But I had a question of staff, and that is that the application be forwarded to ALC, but there's been no recommendation by staff, like as opposed to whether we should approve it or not approve it. So are you making, normally staff will recommend either approving it or not approving it. Why is that?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, in terms of the staff recommendation, we are supportive and we do recommend that the application be forwarded to the ALC for their consideration. If it was this opinion of staff that the application should not be forwarded, we would recommend that the application be denied and not forwarded to the ALC.
Okay.
In terms of the existing single-family dwelling on the property, if the subdivision was approved, that dwelling would become legal non-conforming. It could continue to remain on the property. If it was ever demolished, any rebuild of a single-family dwelling on the home would be required to follow today's regulations in terms of the home site, the farm setbacks, and the maximum house size.
Okay, and my last question is, thank you for that. Is there a way for the owner to do their own legal agreement without having to go through the ALC? So in other words, the kids would get X amount of acres for...
Wayne, I think you're muted.
I'll attempt to answer that question, Your Worship. I'm not sure if Councillor Day finished, but in terms of... sorry, Councillor Day, could you repeat the question? You broke up there.
Carol? The question was about whether title, they could further divide it amongst themselves. And my understanding is that the whole rationale for doing this, first of all, is to allow the registered owner to be able to subdivide the parcel so he or she can stay on the property having owned it for an awfully long time. And secondly, it gets subdivided so that the balance of the property, which is going to be planted in cranberries, then they can get financing on it. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. While it may be possible to come up with arrangements over use of land, the only way to create title of land and therefore title to financing would be through subdivision.
Okay. Okay. Carol, you keep breaking up there. Harold?
Yeah, I've got several questions. First one is, was the act changed recently to permit severance, or has this the old legislation? When we brought in the Agricultural Land Reserve Act in 1973, basically it provided for severance of a property if the farmer owned it prior to the act coming in, because the farmers were complaining that they were losing their life investment for when they retired. And the severance was supposed to come to an end sometime in the future. And I thought it had come to an end about 1983 or 84. I wasn't aware that the rule was still there. So I'm wondering, the staff know, was the program discontinued and then brought back again, or has it always been there and nobody used it?
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, my understanding with conversations with ALC staff is this is based on the same legislation that you referenced, and that the policy has remained active throughout.
The policy has been which?
Has remained active.
Okay, because we had some bad experiences even in the first 10 years that properties were removed from, were subdivided out and they were immediately sold And at that time, we were worried about non-farm people who were moving into the agricultural area. Now, with the mega houses, the agricultural area is full of non-farm people. But at that time, it wasn't. And that's really what started the erosion of the ALR in Richmond, was subdividing these properties out. I know that the Land Commission didn't support it because the Wright family asked for a severance many years ago. Richmond, and myself included, approved it, and the Land Commission turned it down. So when was the last time that Richmond approved the severance, or the Land Commission approved the severance? Does council know? Because I believe it was a Richmond policy that we would never do it again.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, we would have to provide that information to council upon research. I do not have that information available to me at present.
Do you recall any time when you've been working for the city that we've actually used this clause? I don't recall it in decades.
Through the chair, I do not recall in my 10 plus years with the city this provision being used.
The other question I've got is how many properties now? Oh, is the owner that's asking to have the severance is actually the actual owner in 1972 still alive? Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, this is the same owner that was involved with a trust that did own the property prior to 1972.
So this person's name was on the title in 1972.
The owner was part of a trust that purchased the property prior to 1972. The owner gained clear title to the property in 1988.
Then it suggests that this property doesn't qualify. Being a trust means you're underage.
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, staff spoke with ALC staff regarding this issue, and they determined that the applicant is still eligible to apply under this policy. Ultimately, the commission will determine the eligibility. Regardless, the eligibility to the policy does not grant them automatic approval to the homesite severance.
Well, I recognize that. Then the final question then is how many properties are left in the agricultural land reserve in Richmond where somebody could apply for a severance? I'm amazed that this one is permitted, but it's obviously because the owner wasn't of age at the time and had a trust in the will of the parent that owned it. So are there any other properties in Richmond, or is this the only remaining one that would have a severance?
Through the chair to Councillor Steves, again, I'm unable to answer that question at present. It would take considerable research to determine how many properties had the same owner prior to 1972.
I would assume that there are very few, because it could only possibly be in a case of, well, yeah, because I didn't even own our property in 1972. I didn't own it till 1978. So, and I could have owned it under a trust, but my father didn't set one up. So that's the difference. So they'd have to be somebody that was a lot older than me to have it under regular ownership, and probably somewhat younger if there was a trust set up for the children. So I doubt if there are very many. I think we're probably in a situation where this is rather unique. So I have, with those answers, then I can support it going to the Land Commission and see what happens with it. But I would like to know a little bit more if we've exempted any more, because I don't think we have since about 30 years ago.
Harold, my recollection of a previous motion to subdivide in this way, and boy, this is just plumbing the recesses of my mind, but I think it was they already had a house, they wanted a second house, and they wanted to use this kind of a provision. I remember there was one application like that. I'm pretty sure we did not approve it. And that may be the one you're talking about, but I'm not sure.
I think that's it.
Okay, Councillor Wolf. Harold, your hand is still up.
Yeah.
And you need to mute yourself.
Thank you. I just have a few short remaining questions. One, is there anything that prohibits the owner from having the back portion of the land converted to cranberry right now without this going ahead? Could they include this into the larger network of cranberry farming, because they are all kind of shared largely in one family?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, I think that's a question best answered by the applicant or the applicant's representative. I would say there are two different types of feasibility. One would be, is it physically possible? The answer would be yes. Is it economically possible? The applicants advised us without subdivision and the ability to finance on the parcel, it would not be possible.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then thank you for that. Just my final follow-up there. The property that would be in the covenant there, that additional property on the frontage, I'm trying to find the page here that shows the picture of it, where does it need to be included? Like, I'm trying to see if the option could be to oh, here it is on page 68. It shows the three parcels, the remainder lot, the home site, and then that other frontage one. I'm just seeing that the other one that's on the front there, could more of that, almost 50% of that, also go into the remainder lot and be converted to Cranberry all the way up to number 7 Road? Why have that so much stick out? I just see the potential in the future that after the 5 years runs out, someone wants to build, they can then apply for fill to cover that whole area, where right now it's actively farmed and it could be converted into Cranberry.
Isn't that a different owner, Wayne?
Through your worship to Councillor Woolley, yes. The site, the long linear site, is not part of the subject application. It is a separate legal parcel. It was created through one of the 2 previous subdivisions that was referenced in the staff report.
And is it the same family, same owner as the parcels around it that are doing the Cranberry, or is that?
Through your worship, or through the chair to Councillor Wolf, we would have to look into that matter. I don't have that information available to me.
Okay, I thought when you mentioned the directions to the north, this is what it's used for, and that I assumed that was one of the ones that would, because you said in the report that all of the surrounding parcels are included, so I thought that would have been one of them.
I don't think that's the same owner.
Okay.
The other parcel.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just had some questions of staff. First off, under what circumstances can covenants be discharged?
Through the chair to Councillor Green, depending on the nature of the covenant, the discharge provisions vary. In terms of a no-build covenant such as this, it could only be discharged with mayor and council's approval.
Okay, because I'm concerned about that because I remember during the rush to build mega houses, one of the farmers had put a covenant on his house to not have a mega house on his property, and he passed away, and the new owner put a mega house on it because the covenant was discharged. And I'm really concerned that we're going to be putting something on there that can be taken away.
The covenant will run with the land. It will run with the land. It's a registered charge.
Until council decides that they've heard enough and they absolutely support putting another house on the property, in which case the covenant's discharged. So I'm quite leery of that. The other thing is
just a minute on that point. Every covenant, if everybody agrees, can come off. You can't put a covenant on that's going to be inviolate and is impossible to remove. So the covenant would be in favor of the city always, everywhere.
But the city can remove it.
That's my point.
Exactly. That's my point too.
No. It's not a joke. This is always the case. The covenant is in favor of the city. So, like, theoretically, they could have, if the registered owners had discharged the land use contracts, they could be discharged because they were in favor of the city. And similarly here, they'd be entering into a covenant that they'd have to get the necessary permissions to have it removed.
We are in agreement. So my other concern then is that this wasn't actually the person's primary residence. The principal residence clause was supposed to be for 1972. and it wasn't the principal residence until a decade and a half later. So it doesn't really fit that profile. I imagine it's very nice to be on a trust fund. I don't know what that's like. My other question is what's precluding them from getting financing on the parcel as is? Are we just artificially raising the value of the property in order to get more financing?
Through your worship, to Councillor Green, again, we're relying on the applicant's information. The intent is for the original homeowner to remain on his site. It would be a separate legal entity. By severing off the remaining agricultural property, it is able to obtain independent financing, therefore allowing the original owner to retire.
Well, that sounds very interesting, but I'm not in favor of that kind of division. Thank you.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. As I recall, we did allow a subdivision, not under this policy, but for estate planning and farm succession planning to go through to the ALR, and I believe it was within the last couple of years. And I guess the point that what I'm trying to get at is that these are real issues that confront farming families as they try and plan for the future and the hope that their children will continue to farm. And we do know, and I think anybody who owns property knows how difficult it is to get financing if you don't hold title. And I guess I'm just interested into what the consultant has to add into the conversation. Can we hear from the consultant now?
Yeah, that'll be next, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a consultant here in the room named R.G. Bob Holtby from Regency Consultants Limited. Is that you, sir? Yes. Okay, why don't you come forward and see if we can answer a few of these questions, and we may want to go to the other people who are here about some of the title questions or something. But why don't you have a seat and first of all, make your remarks, and then we'll ask if there's any questions of you.
Okay, I don't have a lot to add. The work done by basically Stephen DeSouza as staff captured the intent fairly well.
Well, you've heard the questions about the severance and the financing.
Yes.
Is that something you can comment on, or we should go to the others?
Oh, very, very much so. I can comment on it.
Okay, go ahead.
If I could, just a couple of points from my notes from the questions. Sure. There was reference to the previous subdivisions made under the ALR. Those subdivisions were made so that the current generation could farm, and including David May and his brothers. And that was 30 years ago, and we've now come to a new generation and a new time to transfer title. The development mentioned in the report is basically to develop the land out of forage crops, which it currently is hay crops, which it currently is being used for, into cranberries. And as we've said, the capital requirements to make that change are high and require credit. And in order to access credit, you need title. And so the whole purpose of this subdivision is so that the remainder portion, as it's referred to, will have separate title, and so that the next generation, Mr. May's son, can develop it, and that's just it's just the plain and simple reality of the whole thing. You need credit to do it, and title is required for. I could add there's to Councillor Steve's questions that I agree with him that there's very few of these home site severances left, or eligibility left, because just because of the 48 years since the December 21st, 1971 date, 71, 72. I actually did one in the Okanagan a couple of years ago where a teenager got an orchard for $1 from his parents back in '66. In this case, Mr. May has had an ownership interest in the property since it was purchased in 1971, and so my view and my counsel was that represents a reason that would conform to the policy, recognizing that he didn't move on the site until all the other issues were dealt with, and in 1988, and he did so, and he's been there since. It was my view that the purposes of the subdivision could stand on its own even without home site severance, because of the need for title to the succeeding farmers. But the staff, in their discussion with the commission, has had the commission recognize that they do have the discretion to allow this kind of subdivision for applications presented to them. So basically, we're prepared to proceed on that basis.
All right, now, this may sound like a simplistic question, but I take it that the viability of the remainder of the lot, the major part of that parcel, is going to be far higher, albeit with far greater cost, but the revenue potential from cranberries is going to be, a far sight ahead of using it for forage, just for hay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got a question here from Councillor Day. Councillor Day.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm going to be asking the consultant a couple questions, but before I get cut out, the video is not working, but the audio is not working well for me. I'm hearing about 80% or 70% of what everyone's saying. So in terms of getting financing, the argument by the owner is that if we don't subdivide, then you can't get financing. But if we're putting a covenant on the property to say that you cannot build a home, that lowers the value of the property. Is it not logical to assume that you would be able to qualify for more financing if the 6,600 square foot home and the rest of the property was part of the package to apply for financing?
Well, I'll make a comment and we'll ask the consultant. You're asking the applicant to stay on title, and we can ask him if he chooses to come forward, but I assume that his whole idea is to step away from it and allow his children to obtain the financing and develop that property. Mr. Holtby, do you know if that's accurate?
That's accurate. I could add that the current value of the property, as it exists in bare land status, is with the addition or the renovation of the land into cranberries, it will be a sufficient capital value. You don't need a house on the property to borrow the money. The financing is acceptable through the current status of the property.
All right, Councillor Al.
Yeah.
Just a minute, Carol. You've got something more?
Yes, I will be moving that we refer this back for two reasons. One,
No. This is of questions of this delegation. That's it. We'll get to that later. Councillor Al.
Three questions. The first one has already been asked by Councillor Day. My second question is it possible that for the applicant to transfer the title to the children with an agreement with the children that he will be staying on the site and living there? So, I mean, instead of just making a subdivision and transfer part of it, would it be possible that, okay, yeah, I understand that the children are going to farm the land and make it into a Cranberry farm, so might as well transfer the whole thing to the children. And at the same time, he will stay on living in the remaining portion. Would that be another option?
I think we better ask the applicant that.
Okay. Yeah. And my final question is, perhaps this is also a question for staff. If this is being subdivided, can the owner, at a later date, sell the 3.2 acres that he's keeping? So can he sell it, as a single parcel and for residential use?
The report says he has to transfer the balance of the property to his children, and there's a no build covenant on here.
But I'm talking about the small parcel that he's keeping, the 3.2 acres that he's keeping for himself to stay on. So in a later date, can he sell that parcel? Yes.
Wayne, isn't it after 5 years?
Through the chair, that is correct. The ALC will register a covenant indicating that the property cannot be transferred for a minimum of 5 years, with the exception of passing of the property owner. Outside that 5-year period, there would be no restrictions.
And the third question is, will he has to keep farming the land in the 5 years period and after? Would that land be required to be farmed?
The residential portion?
Yes.
No, there would be no farming on that, would there, Wayne?
Through the chair, that is correct. There is no agricultural activity intended to transpire on the 3.2 acre parcel.
Okay. So that means it's actually taken away from being a farmland into something residential.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, your hand's still up, Chuck. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. And maybe this isn't for the consultant. I don't know who it might be. So if the property owner were to transfer the ownership to his son and just continue to live on the property, if there was like a breakdown in the marriage or the son got into some financial difficulty, could the current owner end up losing his home if anything happened? Like, is that maybe a reason why he hasn't contemplated that particular transaction?
Wade, do you want to comment on that?
Through the chair, I believe that question is best answered by the applicant. I do believe the situation described by Councillor Liu is a possibility if it was to remain as one entity. Okay, so we're in the situation.
Just a minute, Councillor Liu. We can ask the applicant that.
Okay.
But I take it that what they want to do is to subdivide the major portion so they can get financing on it to develop the cranberries and leave clear title to the residential parcel. With the financing, and being in the name of the children and the risk being associated with that being in the children, no matter what happens to that back parcel, if there's a calamity, the front parcel, Mr. and Mrs. May can live in it and it will be clear title. So by doing it this way, they're avoiding the risk, they're avoiding the benefits, but they're avoiding the risk of that financing on the back parcel. The alternative would be that you could have one unsubdivided parcel, but then if the calamity happens, Mr. and Mrs. May could lose their house. And so it's a way of being able to develop the property and put the financing on the property in the back where the farming is going to be, leaving the front parcel, which is the residence, risk-free and clear title.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, so Mr. Holpe, I think that's all for you. Mr. May, did you? I suggest you should come on forward and let's get just a few basics of this situation. So, if you could introduce yourself.
Yes, David May, owner of Mayland Farms. Yeah, we're just, my wife and I are time to retire, and it's time to pass it on to the kids. Succession is a lot to play with this, 100%.
So how old are you're talking about the kids, but they're probably...
I have 4 children, all involved in the farming. Oldest daughter's 34, second daughter's 32. The oldest son is 30, and my youngest son is 26.
Now, you've heard what I said about, I was presuming based yes. on this report, but is that the idea, is to let you retire, yes. step away from that back parcel?
Exactly. You
risk-free.
You said it better than I could, obviously. Yeah, risk-free. When you want to retire, you don't want to be in debt. You don't want to have worries. You want to sit back and watch your next generation, my kids, carry on farming.
Now, questions have been raised about 1972, which is when the ALC Commission was set up and the Agricultural Land Reserve. Now, I don't know how old you are, but tell us about your history with this parcel.
Okay, 1971, my father, we were into dairy. He bought the land for us, put it in trust with our names, I believe, on the paper. I'd have to confirm with that.
Who's it?
Okay, sorry.
Your family?
Yes, my family, my 4 brothers.
Okay.
Randy, Ronnie,
okay.
My 4 brothers, yes.
And so have you farmed that continuously since then?
We have farmed it since 1971, yes.
Okay. And how long have you actually lived on the parcel? Because you built that house.
We built the house in 1988.
Okay. And you've been there since that time?
Since 1988, yes.
All right, we'll throw it open for questions. We've got Councillor Steve. Do you have a question? You're muted, Harold.
I understand your situation very well. Our farm was not in trust when I was a youth. Our farm today is in trust for our children, so we work these things out in advance. I suspect, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but I suspect if this transfer goes ahead, probably somebody in your family would want to take the house that you're subdividing out and live there in the future. Would that be a good guess?
Yes, that is correct. My youngest son, we're doing our succession. As right now in the discussion, he will be getting my house, or our house.
That's what I assumed. Thank you.
Yes.
Maybe you could just elaborate a little more. Harold, your hand's still up. Just elaborate a little more about your children. You say that there's 4 of them, late 20s, early 30s. Do you think they're long-term farmers?
Yes.
I mean, they're farmers now.
They're farmers now. The 2 girls, they're both all involved in the books. They look after all the bookkeeping. They're my right-hand gals. I've got one son-in-law that's, he's come from a ranching background, so he fits in very well. Yes.
What about your sons?
My 2 sons?
Yeah.
They're both working on the farm, yes. Yep, and yeah.
Full-time?
Full-time, yes.
Okay. Okay, anybody have any questions of Mr. May? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. All right. So is there any further comments you want to make to us?
No, I don't think so, if they don't have any questions.
Thank you. We'll excuse you then.
Thank you.
All right. So you have the recommendation of staff. Reference is made to a referral back. Who wants to propose something here?
Recommendation.
Just hang on, Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Worship. I wanted to move the recommendation that's in the agenda.
All right. Is it seconded? It moved and seconded. All right. Linda, do you want to make any further comments?
I just wanted to reiterate that I think, and we've heard now from the owner that he's a longtime owner, almost 50 years. He's farmed the property, his children are farming the property, and that I think it's very prudent to be looking at farm succession and estate planning, and this is a way that allows them to do that. And in the end, it is the ALC that it will make the final decision, and I think that we should allow them to do that. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Day.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Brody. I'm not going to support this because I feel there are too many unanswered questions. And I'd also, because of technical difficulties today, I've only heard about 70% of what was said. So I'm not satisfied voting for this tonight. I actually moved that we refer it back.
All right, well, the motion on the floor is to adopt the recommendation, which would be to approve.
Just to clarify, I made a comment earlier that I wanted to make a motion to refer it back prior to Councillor McPhail's motion to adopt.
Well, a motion to refer is in order at any time. So if you want to make a motion to refer, what you need to do is make that motion and tell us the items that you want to be examined.
Yes. Number one, I feel that we should refer it back to look at how the property can remain as one parcel and still allow financing to be on the property, because as Councillor
just the bare bones now, then you can have your say.
Yeah, it's setting
how
a precedent.
It can remain as one parcel, yes.
It's setting a precedent. We've only had one other project like this in 30 years. I think we need more information before we move forward.
So, okay, so that the motion to refer based on the financing as to how it can stay as one parcel, is that seconded? That is moved and seconded. I can tell you the answer to that, and the answer was in the discussion on it. If Mr. May wants to stay on as a partner at risk, leaving his house as part of the large parcel, this could be done. But the fact is, he doesn't want to do that. And it sounds, after being in it for many years, it sounds like he has a good reason. So I'm not going to support referral. Any other comments? Okay, I'll call the question on referral. Those in favor? I'm just wanting to make sure I've got everyone, because I can't see where's Councillor Day gone now?
I'm here.
Obviously, well, we don't see you. Please turn on your video. Okay, so anyway, we've got three parties. Those opposed? Okay, so it is defeated with Councillor Lou, McNulty, Al, McPhail, the mayor. Harold, I don't see you either. Harold, are you still with us? Has Harold left the meeting? Okay, Councillor Steves has left the meeting, so that is defeated. So back to the main motion. Councillor Day, your hand is still up. Who else would like to speak to this? Okay, I think from my point of view, we've somewhat discussed it, but the fact is, if we want property to be farmed and we want people to farm it forever, seems to me this is the way to do it. let the long-time operators retire, let their children who are full of energy take over, and we have a long-term farm. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Those opposed? Sorry, Bill, you're muted.
What's on the floor, Your Worship? Did the last motion get defeated?
Yes, the last motion was defeated.
4-4 tie? Was it a 4-4 tie?
No, it wasn't a 4-4 tie.
You didn't say who was for and who was against.
I'm trying to do this, but people keep disappearing.
Okay, I'll stay with you.
Day, please turn on your video, and Councillor Steves had left.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to
send it to the ALC.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we'll try this again. All those in favor of sending this to the ALC? Okay, we've got the mayor, Councillor Liu, Councillor McNulty, Councillor Al, Councillor McPhail. Those opposed? Councillor Green. I'm not seeing Councillor Wolf. I'm not seeing Councillor Day. Okay, Councillor Green, Councillor Wolf are opposed. Councillor Day has obviously left, and so has Councillor Steves. Okay.
Steves has just rejoined, I noticed. It just said Harold.
Can we just have a moment for tech support? Because Councillor Wolf a tech support moment because Councillor Wolf noted that he was thrown out of the meeting too. I think that there is a tech problem.
Okay. Does someone want to look at this tech problem?
Sorry, through your worship, it's Grant Fexa on the line. I am actually monitoring the meeting, and there are no issues with the service. I believe that some of the issues people are having are with their independent internet connections. When we used to have video conferencing, there is a minimum recommendation in terms of both download and upload speeds. And when you have problems with video, especially when you're trying to broadcast, there could be issues with your upstream connection with your internet service provider.
All right, Grant, could you please communicate with all the councillors tomorrow and just determine what issues we may be able to have quick fixes or something?
Yes, Your Worship.
So Councillor Steves is back, and but he wasn't there for a while. So on we go. The next one is the application by Polygon Talisman Park, Canby Road, etc., Sexsmith Road. Wayne, Craig, Sarah Badial, what do you want to tell us?
Nothing further to add, Your Worship. We're happy to answer any questions.
All right. Councillor Day, is that your hand up from the previous thing, or do you have something now? Councillor Day, we are not hearing you. Councillor Day, if you can hear me, you might want to get on the telephone because you are cutting out big time. Councillor Green.
Thank you. And through you to staff, I did want to thank them for the answers to my questions earlier. The one remaining thing that I would like to bring up is a request to speak with the developer just to ensure that there's at least some of the visitor spots have electric charging stations. I understand that it's like a mix between the visitors and the commercial, but if we can just make sure that there's at least some access, that would be great.
Well, may I suggest that if this goes through, we would ask Mr. Craig and his department to contact the developers and ask them that specific question. Are you okay with that, Wayne?
Yes, Your Worship, we can deal with that through the development permit should the rezoning proceed.
Okay. All right. Councillor Day. Okay, we're still having problems there. Councillor Wolf.
Yes, my question was, this seems untypical where there's no map on the tree removal and the tree retention in the attachments like there typically would be for this type of proposal. Can you speak to that, staff?
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, there is that information. It is included in the rezoning considerations at the end of the package. There are a number of detailed drawings with respect to tree retention. Essentially, there is very little ability to preserve trees on the property due to the form of development.
Yes, and that to follow up on that, through your worship, is the one of the things I'm not supportive of in this development is yes, we're putting in new park space and open space, but if we listen to the residents and the experts in this area, it's and the picture evidence that we have in the package, it's not the open space species that are evident and that people are speaking of for us to find a way to protect. We're basically removing all the habitat features. Yes, owls, we see them when they're flying, but they're often perched on tall trees during the day as they're migrating around. They don't necessarily just use their nesting site. This has been known for a long time to be a historical place where owls, I remember my great-grandfather talking about small-eared owls in this region as well when they lived just down the road. So I'm not supportive of when we put together park space like this application is showing, where we basically wipe a slate clean and pop a park where there's very little existing benefits to why we have parks. There are lots of these 168 trees that are on the edge of the parcels that we're looking to develop here, and I believe some of that park space could be easily adapted to go around some of the trees that are in the ground now without disrupting the ground and root systems if we give them enough room, which is necessary. So there's a number of other things I'm not supportive of. If we're going to be the world-class city that we speak to, then having a development like this right in the center and only having them achieve the step code 2 or 3. Again, that's not leading the way in many regards. So I'm not sure if staff want to speak to any of those. If not, that's my reasons for opposition.
Wayne, do you want to address any of that?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, in terms of the park design and tree preservation opportunities, I'd refer that question to Todd Gross in our Parks Department. With respect to the step code and the district energy utility, the project does comply with the city's official community plan requirements and building bylaw requirements with respect to energy step code and district energy utility connections.
Okay, Todd, did you want to comment?
Sure, through the chair to Councillor Wolf. Not really much more to add than what's already in the report, but as you've noted, we do have the two areas of tree preservation or removal, either on-site or off-site. So on-site, you're correct, 168 trees will be removed. They will be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio, so 336 new trees will be planted as part of the development process. Off-site within the city, we are retaining trees. We are retaining 64 trees within the boundaries of the development. And then 14 of those trees will be relocated. In addition to that, there are 36 trees, and this is somewhat conducive of the development site that will be removed, and that's primarily because of the health and condition of the trees, and then some of the site servicing and infrastructure. Similarly to the overarching development site preloading, density, etc. That is the challenge when we go through a development of this nature.
All right, Councillor McPhail. Michael, your hand's still up.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, I was really interested to see on our page GP 87 about the farm soil recovery that's contemplated. And is this the first one that we've had? And I'm really pleased to see it. And so is the developer then responsible for testing and salvaging? How would that work? Is there a component that we'd be responsible for if it's going to city property, like say the Garden City lands? Or how does it actually work?
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, I'll refer the logistical question to Mr. Karnicki for a response.
Thank you.
Through the chair to Councillor McPhail, Yes, we are quite excited about the opportunity this site presents for the Garden City lands. There's numerous benefits of relocating that soil, and as far as we know, this is the first of its kind. This sort of arrangement.
Great, thank you. And just a couple other, I just wanted to note that while this is a 3-phase project, we will be seeing the affordable housing and the market rental housing come through in the first phase, which I think is really important when you look at the housing crisis that we have in the Lower Mainland. So the sooner that we can get that online, the better. And I'm glad to see that they've reached an agreement with Success. Now it says tentative. I mean, I guess things could happen along the way, but I mean, Success is a well-known entity to us in Richmond, and so I think it's a good deal. I'll be supporting the recommendation. Thank you.
Councillor Day. Not hearing you, Carol. Okay, we'll go on. Councillor Steves.
Thanks. Actually, I support the application the way it is. I'm really pleased that we're getting the soil. This is the soil we were talking about to cover the lead contamination, lead, mercury, and various other contaminations on the Garden City land. So it will be a real plus to the city. We've been waiting for this to come along for a long time, so I'm pleased to see this going ahead. As far as the barn owls, I'm more concerned about banning the poisons that are used to kill rodents, because Oldfield, yes, provides a habitat for voles, but city dwellings, believe it or not, provide more habitats for rats, and that's what mainly the barn owls consume. So especially residential lots, and maybe if the area is blacktop, but even around City Hall, and that block that the City Hall is, we've got quite a few rats. If you walk down Garden City beside the school board office, you'll find traps set outside to, I think, poison the rats there. And barn owls are a very effective means of keeping rodents in check. So they don't need oldfield habitat for it. They need residential land for it, and they need a ban on poisoning. So I think that what I'd like to hear from staff is, where are we in terms of getting a report back on banning poisoning of owls, because that's the biggest problem here in Richmond. If staff knows, I think it's related to referral.
Who can comment on that?
I can comment on that, Your Worship. Yep. Through your worship to Councillor Steve, staff is currently assessing this right now. Staff are working internally to assess the legislation as well as the contract currently with the Public Health Authority, and we hope to table a report sometime in Q4, which is the objective. So.
Okay, one further comment. We don't need to look for outside experts. We've got experts that work for the city, the Richmond Nature Park. That's where I get most of my information from. We're building nesting sites for the owls that keep dying. And hopefully someday the owls will survive the poison in the neighborhood. That's my comment.
Don't forget that referral, Harold, is only for the use of rodenticide on city property.
Right, but we need to move it on.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Councillor Day, are you back with us here?
I'm trying really hard. I don't know what the problem is tonight. Yeah, I had a question regarding the public art. According to the report, there's $885,000 allocated to public art, and the applicant plans to create something. And I'm wondering if there's an option of putting that towards like art center as opposed to public art.
An art center? Go ahead, staff. Marie?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Day, we're coming back with a report to council with some proposed updates to the public art policy that presents that as an option. I believe that's coming later in September. So at this point, that doesn't exist, but we'll be bringing that back later this month.
All right, Carol, your hand is still up. Councillor Green.
Just a follow-up question for Marie about the public art update. Will this project though be too late to be considered under that update because it's already in progress?
Any projects approved under the current policy will follow the guidelines of the current policy. Any projects approved after would be eligible for any policy changes that occur after that date. Okay,
so this wouldn't fall under that, unfortunately. No. Okay. Yeah, because I take very well the thought that, you know, say for example, if you split 800 in half, 400 for art project would be a lot of money and fantastic, but then 400 for capital improvements so that artists in Richmond can be supported well with art infrastructure, I think would be something good to consider as well. But anyway, thank you.
Carol, your hand is still up.
Yes, thank you. Can anybody hear me? Because I also wanted to know if it's possible to orientate the city park that's located in the center of the project to be more open to the public as opposed to being a private park.
Your comments, Wayne?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the site plan was considered carefully throughout the rezoning process. We do find that the park location being recommended through this project is the most appropriate location. We do like the amount of road frontage that is provided to the park, as that does provide the greatest opportunity for residents to access the park.
Councillor McNulty. Carol, your hand is still up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the comments that are gone. I had a question of Ms. Fenwick, and maybe Mr. Craig. The comment was that this wouldn't qualify under the art policy. When we're not going to get to fourth reading on this for another year. So why wouldn't this qualify? This is only first reading we're going forward to. So why couldn't we direct the funds according to as was suggested?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, the project is being advanced currently under the public art policy that exists. The public art policy that exists to date secures a contribution amount. The art process will continue to unfold. However, the idea of dedicating a portion of the contribution to city capital project in the arts would be something outside of the current policy that would need to be discussed with the applicant, the rezoning considerations before you do not contemplate a capital contribution or distribution such as that. So that discussion could take place, and it's not a closed shop yet. I suggest that it possibly do so. I do have a question on the soil. All the soil will be transferred to the Garden City lands that we're going to get from this, and there will be no cost?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, first, yes, the soil is planned to be directed all to the Garden City lands. And with respect to the costs, it is anticipated that the costs will be recovered through the fee charge for the disposal of the soil onto the Garden City lands per the Garden City land soil fee bylaw.
Well, we're really doing the developer a favor. He doesn't have far to transfer it to the, and his trucking cost shouldn't be too much, and that's why I asked, is it free? Because we're saving the developer just one heck of a lot of money on it, and his tipping fee will be relatively minimal on it. So I hope that that's the case. Can we get an accounting on that? How much soil will come forward, and what obviously the cost will be?
Through the chair to Councillor McNulty, we've estimated that there's approximately 21,000 cubic meters of soil available. When we actually begin the process of recovering the soil and transferring it to the Garden City lands, that's when we'll, you know, I guess the proof in the pudding, if you will, we'll actually be able to realize how much soil there is available to us. It's estimated that over the entire, a substantial portion of the site I won't say the entire site, but most of it, we'll be digging down approximately 2 feet. At that point, we'll then determine whether it will be going deeper or not, depending on a variety of factors.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep our eyes on that. Just one further comment, Your Worship, on the affordable housing. Was there any discussion of affordable housing of integrating the various units as opposed to putting them in one place? And I know it's more convenient to a provider and somebody supervising it, but we've always had a policy of inclusion, and where we include people, but we don't put them necessarily in one place. We tend to try to spread it around as much as possible. Through you to Mr. Craig, was that discussion never pondered in terms of that with the developer?
Through the chair to Council McNulty, yes, we always have those discussions with developers. By consolidating them, we are able to deliver that housing in the first phase of development instead of it being provided as the development occurs. The other key consideration is anytime we do consider consolidation, we do require that a nonprofit housing provider be associated with the project, and that is where success comes into play.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's have a motion.
Move the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Bill, your hand is still up. I think we've beaten it to death. Let's call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? It is carried. Now, just a minute. I'm not seeing Michael Wolf. Are you opposed? So, with Councillor Wolf opposed. Anyone else opposed? All right, so it is carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. Time is marching on, guys, and we've got another full agenda to do for close, so we've got to move it along a bit. Funding agreement with Transport Canada. Someone want to move it?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. Councillor Wolf, is that your hand in the air?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to be real quick.
Yeah, real quick. One is I'm thankful that staff have got to this intersection as they have. I've heard from McNair students who live in this area. They're at Fore Road and Williams, the school. And this has been one of the most dangerous intersections that many students tell me before and after school. They're concerned not just for the crossing the intersection, but the train as well. So I really appreciate that both of those are mentioned in that upgrade. My question to staff is around because this is in the ESA. It's funny, the last application didn't have ESA properties, but this one does. It says if this were to be endorsed tonight, the qualified environmental professional would be involved to look into it. How much ESA impact are we talking about? Because with the limited amount in this report of what works would actually be required, like the arm coming down and new lights overhead, I don't see that much in the need of widening into the riparian area. Could staff just give a brief comment on what extent of impact could occur?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, you're right. There's not a ton of impact, but because there is some impact, we still have to hire a qualified environmental professional.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, your hand's still up, Michael. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. City Center Energy Utility Amendment Bylaw.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Salmon Restoration Project. Someone want to move it?
So moved.
Is that moved and seconded? Discussion on that. Oh, Councillor Steves. Go ahead, Harold. You're muted.
Yeah, a quick comment on it. I'm a bit disturbed that the port may probably try to take credit for this. They should not be entitled to. I've got documentation that staff doesn't have that we've had for decades since the training wall was put up along the Steveston Jetty in 1978. Not just the marsh has gone, but about 2 or 3 feet deep of mudflat all the way out to the edge of Sturgeon Banks. In other words, 7 miles out or 10 or 12 kilometers out. It was eroded away as the water in the river was directed to the silt in the Salish Sea. Fresh water came in without the silt and took the silt out. So rebuilding a bit of marsh habitat may not even work. I'm a bit skeptical because if you don't build up the mud flat beyond it, it's going to erode this land away again. And I'm afraid the port will probably take credit for it, and they'll have to do it over and over again. So I'm with that cautionary note, I will support it, but I am dubious about whether it's going to work or not.
Okay, your hand's still up. Councillor Wolf.
Briefly, I'm in direct support of all of these. I was actually just last weekend exploring these areas, and there's a number of things I brought to staff's attention related to this area, like a boat that was actually stuck just out past Scotch Pond. And I went last weekend, and it's still there at low tide, submerged. And so there's a lot of neglect to this area, and it's hard to access, albeit that. But I really appreciate the connection to the jetty breaches, because that not only for access for people and their small crafts to get through, but the opening for salmon and the number of issues related to salmon collapse and orca and all that stuff. So I appreciate the timely mention and encompassing all these projects. So thank you.
Okay, we'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Michael, your hand's still up. Then we have this problem on the Westminster Highway with the unauthorized watercourse crossing and the decorative wall. Jason Ho, okay, so it's moved and it's seconded. Staff, anything you want to add to that? Pretty self-explanatory.
Self-explanatory. Through the chair, Jason Ho is away this week. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Corinne Hare, Acting Manager, Engineering Planning. Staff typically deal with non-compliance on an administrative level, but due to the potential impacts to private property, a number of steps staff have taken to encourage compliance to date. Without success, we're seeking council authority to impose remedial action to bring them into compliance.
Yeah, thanks. All right, let's call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, Mineral Place Activity Center, conversion to the Art Center. Someone want to move it?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Green.
Thank you. I have a few concerns about this that I'm hoping staff can answer. There was reference to the addition of solar panels on the roof on page 283. I'm really concerned about that. It's in deep shade due to all the trees. If you were to say it was going to be over the adjacent parking lot that is beside Granville Avenue, maybe there's a lot more sun there, but like, unless you're cutting down trees, are you cutting down trees? Yep.
Through the chair to Councillor Green, no, we are not intending to cut down any trees. We're limiting our work to the building interior and potentially the roof for solar. At this stage, we have not done any design for the solar. If council were to approve this report, we would commence that design process and look for the best opportunity to provide solar power. And that could include, not necessarily on the roof, but it can include what the best possible location may be.
I'm sorry, I'm not finding that particularly satisfactory, giving a green light to something that doesn't even make sense in that particular section. It's very, very deeply shady with the size of the trees. Even just a few 100 feet down, sure. Solar made sense on top of the fire hall, but it doesn't make sense to me at all here. I'd also really like to say that it's already an expensive project, and if we cut some bells and whistles, I think that we could make a really good, serviceable, quality building, but it doesn't need to be a Cadillac. And I'm very much in favor of having, things that are environmentally friendly and reducing the GHGs, but this is not ticking those boxes for me. I'm sorry. So I'm not in favor of the additional cost. So if we can section out item 3, I'd appreciate that from the vote.
The question of staff, if we get this grant, isn't it greatly reducing the budget?
Yes, Mr. Chair. What this would do is we would leave the budget at the current value. We'd simply be replacing the already approved budget
by council with the grant funding, plus the addition of the $749,000 to introduce the solar and the base building improvements.
So
I'm not in favor of item 3, the addition.
Excuse me. So we're taking the budgeted amount and getting a grant. So that's reducing our expenditures, and then we're spending under the motion $749,000.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. All right. Councillor Liu.
So this isn't the same project that we had recently looked at retrofitting the heating system. That was for the cultural center, not for this building. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Liu, yes, that was for the Library Cultural Center. That was a different project altogether.
Okay, and that's the one where we chose to go with the Cadillac one because it would cut more GHGs. Now for this, going with this, the increase is because there's funding available. Is that what this is about?
Through the chair to Councillor, correct. There's funding available, and what we have from the information that we have is that the optimum project grant funding amount is approximately $2.4 million to $2.5 million. By adding the solar to it, we check a few boxes. One, we maximize the amount of funding that we get from the federal and provincial governments. And two, one of the criteria that's important in the assessment of the grant applications is sustainability. So we have added that solar component to the grant application so that we can better position the city to receive that funding.
Okay, and will solar work, or the photovoltaic, probably in this case, will that work on this building?
Through the chair to Councillor, yes, it will work.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day.
Mayor Brody. Okay, so my question is, if this building is a very, very old building, and if we take this, as Councillor Green said, to the Cadillac level, I mean, how long is this building going to last? And is this the best place to put an infrastructure such as solar on this location? Or if that building becomes redundant, can we repurpose that solar system in another building?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, the building is 1986, and through a previous report to council, the work that's contemplated would add approximately 10 years of life to the building. At the point if we were to decide potentially to take that solar equipment and move it to a different location, that's not something I have an answer for right now, but generally speaking, there always is that ability to salvage equipment and reuse it elsewhere as long as it remains in good condition.
So what's the life expectancy of this solar system, given that we're looking to increase the building from 1986 to add 10 more years?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, we would expect a life expectancy of 10 years plus, much more than 10 years.
But for the solar system?
That's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
The solar system will be moved. If that building got demolished after 10 years, it gets moved. Isn't that right, Jim?
Through the chair to the chair, that is potentially correct. Yes, it will all depend on the condition of the equipment that's installed.
Did I see a Councillor Green? You had your hand up.
Further follow-up question. Can we get information on moving PV panels and also and why they were chosen in the first place? Like is there not any other way of ticking the sustainability box for this project for the federal government? Like, why are we not talking about heat pumps? Why are we not talking about upgrading the insulation building envelope? Why are we not talking about a whole bunch of other things? Taking gas out of the building, for example, electrifying it. Why are we not talking about those things?
To the chair to Councillor Green, staff did consider a number of options, considering geothermal and the likes, building envelope improvements. What we have right now is council has approved $2.511 million for the original scope of the project, and that is a minimal cost to bring the building up to a standard to facilitate a new arts program in that particular facility. The solar itself is one of the least expensive types of sustainability item to be able to install in the facility. Certainly, if it was council's direction, we could look at alternate power or sustainability features, but at the stage where we're at a very high level, concept level, staff felt that solar power would be the best option for this site.
And then just to follow up, if we find out that it is too shady and it's not going to work out very well, are we able to pivot to a different kind of sustainability measure, or what happens then?
Through the chair to Councillor Green, if we don't, first of all, we don't expect the solar to not be successful. However, to answer the question, if it wasn't successful for some reason, it would require additional funding then to convert or to install a new type of technology.
Okay, so there's potentially more money on top of this. And I'm curious, has anybody been down there? Like, the roof is covered with green, thick moss, and I don't think that that's usually something you see where it's sunny.
Your Worship, if I could just jump in and add a further clarification. As Mr. Young has stated, we are attempting to best position the city to be successful in getting this grant, and the sustainable component is one of those, and we think this is the best value proposition to move the project forward. It does not commit us to putting the solar panels actually on the building. There could be many sites in the vicinity or on the library cultural center. The key would be that these panels would service the building, but they don't have to be located. So part of the detailed design process, if we were successful, the grant would be that analysis. And it may well be the case that, yes, they wouldn't necessarily have to be placed on top of the Art Center. They could be placed in another location in the precinct.
All right, let's call the question then on the motion. Councillor Green, did you want this split out on number 3?
No, I'm satisfied with the last answer. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of all 3? Anybody opposed? That is carried. Then that brings us to Councillor McNulty. You wanted to make a referral to consider, for staff to consider a mask policy for city buildings. Do you want to move that?
I would move that referral to staff for policy of the use of masks in all city buildings or in all buildings that are under the city's jurisdiction. If I get a second, I'll be brief.
Is it seconded? It's seconded. Go ahead. Thank
you very much, Your Worship. Given the situation, we're told masks are extremely beneficial in curbing the spread of the virus. We've even though we have a policy of staying 6 feet away, and that's not good enough in my opinion. I think we need to lead and set an example. We've got in some of our facilities now where staff are around, some are wearing masks, some are not. And I think we don't have to expound on the beneficials of wearing masks in public and at work. The benefits are self-explanatory, and I think we need to make sure that what we're doing in the city is beneficial. Just look at the stats over the weekend, the highest number of cases, 429. We're starting to get out of control, and the second wave isn't even here. So I think it's something we've got to ask all staff to work together and all councillors. I know when I go into a public building or anywhere in their building, I wear a mask, even going from the parking lot to it. So I think this is something that I'd like staff to come back in a positive manner and say, let's wear them. Thank you. Okay, so that motion is on the floor. We don't need people, councillors, talking about the benefits of the mask. All it is for staff to look at it. Bring it back. You know, as we're reopening various city facilities. So I've got questions, Councillor Green, and again, we've got a long agenda still. We've got to move it along.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that the referral can deal with different age groups and different activity levels, and different activities and things like that, but particularly for age groups. Thank you.
Sure. Good. Thank you. It can deal with all kinds of things. Councillor Wolf.
Yes, thank you. I would like to just ensure that in that discussion from staff, they consider the inside and outside, because if a person were to go, because this is at buildings, are we talking about just inside the buildings? What about a courtyard space that's only accessible through the building? So can people find places to have relief, especially if they're in those places where there's no one else around? Just like at a school right now, today, if I went into the courtyard, no one else was in the courtyard, I took off my mask. I don't want that to be a reason that prevent somebody from getting relief in that way if they can. Safely.
All circumstances can be taken into account by staff. Councillor Rao.
Yes, I want to know how soon can staff come back with a report?
As soon as possible.
Who can tell us that? Can you get it back to us within a month?
Or faster?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It's Serena Lusk. Yes, we'll work towards it as quickly as possible and certainly within a month's time.
All right. Councillor McPhail, check your hand is still up.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just wanting to ask then if this would include discussions with WorkSafe BC, Vancouver Coastal Health, and the cost implications, and if this then applies to staff, because it's my understanding if an employer makes it mandatory for employees to wear masks, the employer has to pay the cost. Not that I'm against it, but I just want to make sure all these bases are covered.
Yes, I think this examination would include all of that. But having said all this, we're now starting to remind ourselves of the complexity of what we're talking about. So it is it's an easy question to ask. It's complex to answer. So we're going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. All right, someone move adjournment. Okay. And I'm going to call the closed meeting to order. May I have a motion on closure compliance in the agenda? What's this? Oh, I'm sorry. Finance. We've got Finance Committee. I forget. I get ahead of myself. So I'm calling the Finance Committee to order. Motion on the minutes.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. And all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Extension of non-acceptance of cash till March 31st. Someone want to move it? Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Financial information for the second quarter. Someone want to move to receive? Moved and seconded. Any questions? Councillor Green.
Just, I'm concerned about the community grants, which are from the gaming revenue, and the casino's been closed. When we get closer to the end of the year and we know what's going to happen, can we get kind of a big heads up on those grants? Not all of them are vital, but some of them are for our community groups.
There is going to be further information coming to us on the grant situation shortly. Councillor Day. Kelly, your hand's still up. Councillor Day.
On FIN 17, it talks about building permits are down 34%, but construction values are up 47%. That's a big difference. Is that because there's been so many larger developments happening, particularly in the Capstan area?
Staff, do you want to comment?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, that is correct. It is directly related to large multifamily unit developments.
Okay, and then I find it interesting that housing starts are declining by 90%. That is a significant number. A very good report, very interesting. Thank you.
All right, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Liu, you had a question?
Thank you through the chair. Question to staff. I see business licenses are down 25%. I think we know that some businesses are continuing to operate in the city, maybe without business licenses, but seeing a huge drop in the number of business licenses. Do we have any suggestions by staff on things that we could do to be supporting some of our businesses in Richmond right now? We've got something like 8,000 businesses in Richmond, and if 25%, we're seeing a 25% number of people renewing their business licenses. This could pose some future problems that we really need to consider, because it's going to roll down into people then having jobs, people being able to afford their rents. Like, I think we've got some big things on the horizon here, and so I'm wondering if staff is contemplating coming forward with any suggestions or recommendations.
Who could answer that?
Sorry, Your Worship, it's Grant Fixit. I can maybe speak briefly on one initiative that is actually currently underway, and that is we're enhancing the My Richmond portal to include what we call a My Business section. and that'll provide full capabilities for both application as well as license renewal online, 7x24. This will guide new businesses through the process, and will also integrate city staff in terms of being able to go through the whole workflow and approval process for getting a business license, and will provide an easy facility to renew business licenses. The expectation is that this new portal capability will be available in November.
All right.
Thank you.
Cecilia, you have your hand up. Is there something you want to say quickly?
Yes, through the chair, economic development is also working very closely with our small businesses to help them through the COVID and give them training and such. So staff are working very closely with the community to support the existing businesses.
Okay.
Okay.
And it's one more question. It occurs to me that we as a city aren't actually able to take part in that rent, 75% rent, and where a portion gets covered by the federal government, because it then gives a benefit to an individual company. Is that correct, or am I wrong on that?
That's correct.
Okay. So our opportunities to take advantage of some of these benefits are kind of limited.
Appears so.
Okay.
Okay, we'll call the question then. All those in favor of receiving this? Any opposed? It's carried. Active capital projects information. Someone want to move it? Someone want to move it?
So moved.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Councillor McPhail, we really have to move this along.
Thank you. I just have a question. I was asked about the new City Center Community Police Office, and I know on our FIN 56 it said it was occupancy. So I just threw you to staff. Is it operating then? I had a question from a business owner who's nearby the old City Center Police Office and wondering what was going on. So has there been a communication to the business community about the move and if they, those kinds of things?
Through the chair,
can you comment?
Through the chair, the CPO is operational. It's just not open to the public at this point in time through COVID, but we are deploying staff from there.
Okay, Councillor Green.
Thanks. The report looks great. I just had one concern, and that was on FIN 57, item 2. The MUP on number 6 road. I was by there just a few weeks ago. It says on the report that it's going to be done in Q3 2020. It doesn't connect to either Canby Road or Bridgeport Road. It's just this segment that kind of ends. As well, I noticed there was a telephone pole in the middle of the path that would be impossible to go around it on a bicycle without going onto the road, and the whole point is to not be on the road. Can we have comment on the feasibility of this actually being completed by Q3?
John?
Yeah.
Who can comment on that?
I think I can, Your Worship. My understanding is that it is to be completed by the end of Q3, but I can ask staff that question again and report back.
That would be great because it doesn't appear to hook up to either road or any other piece of infrastructure. It's orphaned. It's connected by a little footpath that's been chewed in the ground at the either end of this piece of sidewalk or MUP. So that would be great. Thanks.
Okay. Your hand's still up. Michael.
Real quick on the same page, 57. Item number 5, Alderbridge Way, multiple use pathway. Could staff just comment? I know part of it is complete, the western half, and I heard that the eastern half design was still being done. Will council be privy to the design before the installation of the remainder of that project? That's the Alderbridge Way, MUP.
Number 4 road to Shell. All right, we'll ask staff to comment on that. Get us a memo on it, okay?
Thank you.
All right. We'll call the question then. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Lulu Island Energy Company, the second quarter. May I have a motion? May I have a motion?
So moved.
And seconded. Discussion, questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And the Oval second quarter results. May I have a motion on that? Moved and seconded. Discussion on that. Councillor Green.
Thank you. Year-to-date loss is $483,000. What's the plan for the end of the year, and are you allowed to carry a deficit position?
Through the chair, we are continually doing projections. What you see currently year to date is obviously there's a deficit, and that's due to the closure of the facility in the second quarter. We have opened up services in Q3, and we are trending in the right direction going forward.
So we're not anticipating being in deficit at the end of the year?
Through the chair, right now, if you look at the year-to-date results before amortization, we are favorable by approximately 500,000. So, based on the current trend, we're heading in that direction.
Thank you kindly.
All right, we'll call the question then. Kelly, your hand's still up. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. And someone move adjournment.